This section is for premium passengers only. Lauren, the purser, snapped, her arm blocking the aisle like a gate. In 2 amperes, Julian Cole, a black man in a tailored navy suit, raised his boarding pass without a word, his calm presence clashing with her sharp tone. She waved security forward, certain he didn't belong. Phones rose. A passenger live-streamed with a smirk, and the crew fell in line. He didn't protest. He sat steady, letting the engine hum fill the silence. Minutes later, the truth flipped the cabin. The man who was mocked as an intruder was a billionaire investor minutes away from sealing their biggest deal in years. By touchdown, one tweet had rewritten the market. What happens when silence becomes the sharpest form of power? Where are you listening to this story from? Drop it in the comments below. And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe now so you never miss the next one. Now, let's begin. The jet bridge echoed with that hollow, metallic hum every traveler knows. But in first class, the air felt different. Cooler, brighter, sharper. The lighting was cold, silver white, reflecting off leather seats that seemed carved for permanence. Every surface whispered, this was a place for those who belonged. Julian Cole walked in without hurry. His shoes were soft-soled, his jacket plain, his luggage an old leather case that looked like it had crossed oceans before anyone in the cabin was born. He paused, scanned the room, then slid quietly into seat 2 amperes. He didn't need to check the number. He already knew. From 3 rows back, Victoria's seat 3C, first class regular, hair perfectly pinned, watched him with that half-smile people wear when they're certain of their place. Her eyes flicked to the case, then back to the man, then to the manifest glowing on the cabin screen above the galley. Something didn't fit, and she knew it. Laura Smith, the purser, had already noticed. She was the guardian of first-class decorum, the keeper of rules that felt heavier than any manual. Her jaw tightened. She leaned toward the screen again, tapping twice. The name didn't match. Her voice carried that clipped edge trained over years of service with precision. "Sir," she said, stepping forward. "This section is for premium passengers only." Julian didn't move. He looked up once, eyes calm, face unreadable. No sign of irritation, no plea, just stillness. From the cockpit, Captain Robert Stanton heard the tone of her announcement through the open interphone. He made a quick note on the flight pad beside him. VIP pending. Seat 2 amperes. Something in his gut told him this might not be a simple boarding dispute. His hand hovered over the radio switch, ready to listen. Laura folded her arms lightly against her vest. "May I see your boarding pass?" "Might not be a ma." Julian handed it over with 2 fingers, the motion slow, deliberate. No explanation, no softening smile. Laura scanned it, frowned again. The screen behind her still flashed a discrepancy. Name. Mismatch. Passengers shifted in their seats, sensing theater. First-class silence was a kind of luxury until it broke. Victoria tilted her phone toward her lap, pretending to scroll but already typing. Her lips barely moved as she whispered to the neighbor, "People like that always try to sneak in." The words were bait, dropped into the quiet, like acid. Julian's expression didn't flicker. He leaned back, let the moment hang, his gaze passing over Laura, as though testing something beyond her uniform. Stanton tapped the flight officer beside him. "Make sure we know exactly who's in 2 amperes. Something feels off." The aisle seemed longer now, every head slightly turned, every screen waiting. Laura squared her shoulders, boarding pass still in hand, convinced of her ground. "Sir," she said again, louder this time, "this section is reserved." The cabin fell into perfect silence, that strange pressurized quiet before turbulence. No one breathed too hard. They waited to see if he would shrink back into anonymity or stand tall in a place where belonging was not given freely. And Julian Cole, billionaire investor, man holding $1 billion signature in his pocket, sat perfectly still, letting the weight of her words settle around him. Laura Smith tightened her grip on the boarding pass. Her voice sharpened, the kind of tone that slices under the skin and leaves no visible mark. "Security, I need verification for seat 2 amperes, she said into her intercom, each syllable clipped as if carved out of steel. The words weren't meant only for the receiver. They were meant for the whole cabin. The reaction was instant. Heads lifted from tablets and champagne flutes. The air itself felt heavier, charged, as if the ceiling lights had dimmed. Victoria, seat 3C, let out a low chuckle, soft, derisive, just loud enough to carry. "Some people always try to sneak in," she muttered, stage whispering for effect. She flicked her thumb across her phone, typing as she spoke. "First-class circus tonight. Someone's about to get walked out." Her manicured nails tapped the glass like gunfire. Julian Cole remained still, his hands folded loosely on his lap, his gaze drifting toward the window where the jet bridge connected like a mechanical limb. The hum of the air conditioning seemed louder in the quiet. Then, in a voice so calm it cut through Laura's performance, he asked, "Are you sure you want to make that call on record?" The words were not loud. They didn't need to be. They held the weight of inevitability. For the first time, Laura's lips pressed together in hesitation. She glanced at the boarding pass again, then back at his face, as though trying to see what she had missed. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Stanton leaned closer to the interphone. He caught every syllable of Julian's warning. Something about the tone sent a chill down his spine. This was not a man bluffing his way into a better seat. This was a man holding cards unseen. He looked to his first officer. "Cross-check 2 Alpha, quietly. Copy," the officer said, already scrolling through the system. In the cabin, Victoria smirked and angled her phone higher, as if her screen was an extension of her gaze. "Oh, this is going to be good," she whispered, pressing post. The faint glow of likes and comments began to flicker almost instantly. Laura stepped back, squaring her shoulders. "Until security verifies, you'll need to remain standing, sir," she declared. The authority in her voice had returned, bolstered by procedure. Julian didn't rise. He didn't argue. He simply looked at her as though the outcome had already been written, as if she were a character in a play reciting lines she didn't know were tragic. Around them, first-class passengers shifted, tension sliding across their expressions. Some leaned back, hoping to avoid involvement. Others leaned forward, hungry for the spectacle. The rhythm of footsteps echoed faintly up the aisle, measured, heavy, unavoidable. Security was on the way. Laura straightened her uniform, her chin lifting, convinced she was right, convinced that rules were a shield. Julian let his fingers brush against the edge of his phone on the armrest. He didn't unlock it. Not yet. He simply waited, his silence louder than her command. Every passenger's attention turned as the sound of those footsteps grew sharper. Each beat a countdown. The cabin held its breath. "Security, we need verification for 2 amperes, Laura repeated, her voice now carrying the force of theater. And as the footsteps drew near, every head turned, waiting for the collision, wondering not just who Julian Cole was, but what he might unleash. The aisle trembled with the sound of boots. 2 security officers stepped into first class, their presence slicing through the hush like a blade. Radios crackled at their shoulders. Passengers instinctively straightened in their seats, adjusting ties, clutching glasses, pretending to be invisible witnesses to what was about to unfold. Laura Smith pointed to 2 amperes with a sharp flick of her hand, as if presenting evidence. "This gentleman needs verification. His manifest doesn't match." Her voice was pitched higher now, carrying all the way down the cabin. Julian Cole sat still. The leather seat seemed molded around him, his hand resting loosely on the phone by his thigh. He didn't look at Laura, nor at the officers. He looked at the rows of faces. Victoria, in 3C, already lifting her phone to eye level. Screen glowing, live. "This is first class," Victoria whispered for her followers, her lips curving into a smirk. "And some people really don't belong here." She tapped her screen twice. The red circle lit up. Live. Her caption came quick. Entitled guy caught sneaking into 2 amperes. Watch this. The first officer cleared his throat. Sir, we'll need to confirm your ticket. His tone was practiced, firm, neutral. The kind of voice used on people who don't matter enough to protest. Laura folded her arms, relishing the moment. You can either show them proper documentation or step off the aircraft. Cameras clicked. Not just Victoria's stream, but scattered phones across the cabin. The hush had turned into the digital rustle of recordings. The quiet predation of modern shame. Julian didn't argue. He didn't rise. He reached instead for his phone, thumb pressing the button, screen lighting up. For a moment, it looked as if he might scroll, but he didn't. He simply let the device rest on his knee, ready, waiting. Captain Robert Stanton sat in the cockpit, headset angled to catch fragments of the scene over the interphone. The purser's tone wasn't protocol. It was performance. He turned to his first officer. Status on 2 amperes? The FO glanced at his monitor. Name mismatch, but hold on. Flagged as VIP pending. It's unusual. Stanton's eyes narrowed. Unusual isn't enough. We need certainty before we make a mistake. In the cabin, the second officer stepped closer. Sir, either you move or you leave this aircraft. His voice cut sharper than Laura's. A command, not a request. Julian's fingers brushed across his phone, slow, deliberate. The glow reflected faintly against the polished seatback. He still hadn't spoken. He didn't need to. The silence itself was strategy. Victoria zoomed in, whispering commentary into her mic. He's not moving. Oh my God, this is wild. He's literally just sitting there. This is going viral. Her chat began flooding with comments. Some laughing. Some asking who he was. Laura's pulse quickened. For the first time, doubt flickered at the edges of her authority. She tried to bury it. You're holding this flight up, sir. Cooperate, or you will be escorted out. Julian lifted his eyes to meet hers. Calm. Cold. No raised voice. No theatrics. Just the weight of presence. And still, he didn't move. The seconds stretched, thick with tension. Security shifted on their feet, waiting for a signal. Passengers held up phones higher, eager for the moment of collapse. Julian's thumb hovered over his screen. The entire cabin leaned in, breathless, waiting for impact. Either you move, or you leave this aircraft, the officer repeated. Julian's fingers brushed his phone, and the whole cabin froze. Everyone knew something was about to detonate. Julian Cole's phone glowed faintly in the dim first-class light. His thumb slid across the screen, deliberate as a surgeon's hand. The cabin, crowded with eyes and hidden cameras, waited for him to break silence with a gesture. He typed just 10 words. No explanation, no fury. A single image of his boarding pass, paired with the line, "Some protocols reveal more than they protect." Then, beneath it, the airline's hashtag. He didn't add more. He didn't need to. His finger hovered for a second, then pressed send. The quiet click of his phone became thunder. Victoria, still live streaming from 3C, squinted at her own feed. "Oh, please," she muttered for the camera. "Playing victim now? Classic move." She typed furiously, her post dripping with smugness. Guy's faking his pass. Security's here. Total scam. She leaned back, as if she'd won, unaware she had just preserved evidence of her own prejudice for the world to see. Laura Smith snapped her head toward Julian, eyes narrowing. "This changes nothing," she said, voice tense. "Your name is not on the manifest." She clung to the script she had memorized for years, rules meant to be shields. But the tremor in her words betrayed her unease. Julian slipped the phone back into his jacket pocket, his expression unchanged. Not defiance, not submission, just an almost serene stillness, as if he had already moved the board 3 steps ahead. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Stanton heard the buzz of chatter through the interphone. The tension in Laura's voice made his gut tighten. He'd flown enough years to know when a situation was spiraling beyond control. He looked at the glowing clock on the console, then leaned toward his first officer. "We're not pushing back until we know exactly who's in 2 amperes. The FO hesitated. "HQ wants us airborne, Captain." Stanton shook his head. "Not until I say, lock the brakes." His tone left no space for negotiation. Back in the cabin, the security officer's radio crackled. A clipped voice from headquarters. "Hold position until further instruction." Passengers shifted uncomfortably, curiosity battling with unease. A businessman in 1D pulled out his own phone, scrolling news feeds. "That was fast," he whispered to himself. "It's already trending." Victoria's stream chat exploded. Comments rolled up her screen faster than she could read. "Check Twitter. He's verified. That's Julian Cole. You idiots. This isn't going to end well for the airline." Her smirk faltered. For the first time, her viewers weren't laughing with her. They were laughing at her. Laura stood rigid, her clipboard held like armor. She repeated more loudly than before, "Until verification is complete, this seat is not yours to occupy." Her words rang hollow, drowned by the glow of 1,000 phones outside the aircraft, already echoing Julian's post. Julian turned his head slightly, almost as if he were listening to the faint roar of the internet rising beyond the fuselage. He didn't answer Laura. He didn't have to. He pressed send, and above, 2 decks away in the cockpit, the radio erupted with an order no one expected. "Flight 228, hold your position. Do not push back." The doors remained open, engines silent. The cabin was trapped in suspension, like a stage before the curtain rises. Laura Smith stood in the galley, her face tight with strain, waiting for orders that never seemed to come. The interphone crackled. "Headquarters. Captain Stanton. Maintain ground position until further review." Robert Stanton leaned forward in his seat, eyes fixed on the runway lights beyond the glass. His hand rested on the throttle but never moved. He'd flown through crosswinds and lightning storms, but what brewed inside his aircraft felt heavier than any weather. He pressed the button. "Understood. Holding position." In first class, the weight of delay rippled through the passengers. Murmurs started like a low tide. Victoria, seat 3C, shifted restlessly, whispering into her phone for her audience. "My flight's already 30 minutes late." The comments scrolling across her stream were no longer sympathetic. "Check your facts. You don't even know who he is. Stop filming and listen." Her brow furrowed, unsure when her control had slipped. Laura marched down the aisle, intercepting Stanton at the cockpit door. Her voice was sharp, brittle. "Captain, this is protocol. The manifest shows a mismatch. I've done my job. Security is handling it. We need to depart." Stanton removed his headset, his voice low but unyielding. "Your job is service. Mine is command. And right now, command says we don't move until we know exactly who's in that seat." His eyes didn't waver. Years of authority compressed into one line. Laura flushed. She opened her mouth to argue, but the force in his tone pinned her silent. Julian Cole, still seated in 2 amperes, pulled his phone from his jacket with unhurried grace. He scrolled once, then turned the screen toward Stanton as the captain stepped closer. The glow illuminated a rising storm, likes climbing by the second, retweets cascading in waves. Julian's boarding pass sat there, public for millions to see. Next to the caption, "Some protocols reveal more than they protect." Stanton's expression shifted. Recognition flickered. He saw the verification badge, the name that had surfaced in briefings about potential investors. He remembered the warning, VIP pending. And now, the scope of the mistake cracked wide open in his chest. "God help us." he whispered. Julian's eyes met his for the first time. Calm, cold, certain. Stanton didn't need words to understand. This wasn't just a passenger. This was a storm system. And they were already inside it. Laura stepped forward, indignant. "Captain, are you really going to take his word?" Stanton cut her off with a raised hand. "Enough. You've said plenty." He pressed the interphone. "Control. This is Flight 228. Hold position. Do not close that door." The command reverberated through the cabin like a gavel strike. Passengers stilled. Phones glowed brighter. The aircraft was frozen on the tarmac. But online, the engines had already roared to life. The cabin lights glared too bright for comfort now, as if the plane itself knew it had become a stage. Passengers shifted, restless, screens glowing in their hands. Every moment of silence was pierced by the tapping of fingers, sending fragments of the story outward. Julian Cole sat motionless in 2 amperes, his phone dark again. The ripple of his first tweet, still expanding like shockwaves through water. He didn't need to touch it. The world was already moving for him. In C3C, Victoria tried to keep her live stream alive. Her voice carried a brittle confidence. A high laugh forced out between words. "We're all delayed because of this guy. He thinks he's clever. Trust me, he's nothing special." She tilted her phone, zooming on Julian's profile as though framing her own verdict. But the comments scrolling across her screen told another story. "You're streaming Julian Cole, billionaire investor. Do you know who you're mocking? Delete this before you embarrass yourself more." Some comments turned brutal, dissecting her smirk in real time. The numbers on her feed spiked, not with applause but with outrage. She blinked, thrown off balance. Evelyn Carter, a journalist with a restless nose for trouble, leaned against her desk hundreds of miles away. She saw Julian's tweet climb to the top of her trending board, paired with shaky footage from inside the plane. She didn't hesitate. Her retweet landed like a hammer. This isn't a passenger dispute. This is a system showing its true face. Her following multiplied the effect. The narrative was out of the airline's hands. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Stanton leaned closer to his first officer. "We're sitting on a media bomb," he muttered. He could feel the aircraft shrinking around him, the pressure rising. The FO glanced at the ticker running on his tablet. News channels had already picked it up, stock price crawling across the bottom of the feed. Back in the cabin, Laura Smith paced the galley, her jaw tight, eyes darting to the tablet mounted by the service station. Even there, the headlines had infiltrated. "Airline faces backlash after first-class incident." She turned sharply toward Julian. "You think this stunt will get you somewhere? It won't." Her words cracked with strain, a note of desperation where certainty used to be. Julian didn't reply. His silence pressed harder than her scolding. A businessman in 1D lowered his newspaper, whispering to no one in particular. "The stock's dropping. Look." He angled his phone, showing the line on the graph slipping lower and lower in real time. His neighbor swallowed hard, realizing the flight delay was no longer about one seat. It was about billions, evaporating by the second. Victoria's live stream chat flooded faster than she could read. The screen lit with one hashtag repeating like a drumbeat. "Number passenger 3C. She frowned, confused. Then her expression faltered when she realized she was the joke now. Laura's polished certainty cracked. She gripped the seatback in front of her, eyes darting to Stanton's closed cockpit door. The silence inside first class was no longer quiet. It was judgment. And then, as if on cue, the stock ticker slid downward again, a steep drop flashing red across financial feeds. Somewhere in headquarters, alarms began to ring louder than the engines ever could. The headquarters boardroom glowed with the light of a dozen screens. Charts slid downward in angry red, alerts pulsing across the wall. Sarah Mitchell, head of corporate PR, stood stiffly at the center of the storm. Her phone buzzed in her palm every few seconds. Each vibration, another headline. She didn't need to scroll. She already knew what it said. "It's him," she murmured. "Julian Cole." Around her, executives shifted like restless cattle. One slammed a fist against the table. "How the hell did we let this happen?" Sarah didn't answer. She stared at the viral tweet, the millions of impressions climbing with every blink. Cole hadn't spoken more than one line, and yet the market was bleeding. She swallowed hard, then pressed her headset. "Get me the captain." "No." Back in the cockpit, Captain Robert Stanton heard the commotion crackling in his ear. A voice from HQ barked instructions. Frantic. "Ground that flight. Get control of the cabin. Move him if you must." Stanton's jaw tightened. He glanced at his first officer. "Already ahead of them," he said evenly. He tapped the interphone. "This aircraft isn't moving an inch until I know exactly what I'm carrying." His tone left no doubt. Command rested with him, not the panic flooding from headquarters. In first class, Laura Smith's tablet vibrated. A message from corporate flashed across the screen. "Report immediately. What happened in 2 amperes?" She stiffened, fingers tightening. She typed back hastily. "Passenger refuses to comply. Possible fraud." Even as she sent it, her certainty cracked. The whispers from passengers around her, the glow of Julian's verified tweet, the shifting glances it all pressed against her uniform like invisible hands. Her composure wavered when the reply came. HQ furious. "Fix this." Laura's throat tightened. For the first time, she wasn't sure where fixing ended and failing began. Victoria, still in 3C, leaned toward her neighbor with a conspiratorial whisper. "He's not who he says he is. Watch, they'll pull him out any minute." "Have you even checked Twitter? That is Julian Cole. You're streaming lies." Victoria's smile froze. She tapped her screen, fingers shaking now as she scrolled through comments. Mockery. Screenshots of his verified profile. Hashtags turning her seat number into a joke. Her audience had flipped. She wasn't documenting humiliation anymore. She was starring in it. Julian Cole sat in silence, as though insulated from the chaos. His phone buzzed once more in his pocket, but he didn't touch it. He simply leaned back, watching the fabric of authority unravel. Sarah Mitchell's voice finally cut through the intercom into Stanton's headset. "Captain, ground that flight. Now." And in that instant, the power dynamic inside 2 amperes flipped upside down. The airline wasn't in control anymore. Julian was. The cabin door to the cockpit opened with a low hiss, and Captain Robert Stanton stepped into first class. His cap sat square, his uniform immaculate, but there was a gravity in his stride that silenced even the mutterers in the back rows. He stopped at seat 2 amperes, where Julian Cole sat composed, his jacket uncreased, his phone untouched for the last 10 minutes. The captain's voice was steady, pitched just above a whisper, but strong enough for everyone to hear. "Mr. Cole," he said, lowering his head slightly. "I should have stepped in sooner. That's on me." Phones tilted upward, screens catching the moment. Victoria's live stream stuttered. Her words stalled, as if her mouth had forgotten how to form them. Her audience filled the silence for her. He said, "Mr. Cole. Captain knows him. You really screwed up." 3C. Laura Smith pushed forward from the galley, her face tight with disbelief. "Captain, this is irregular. He's not cleared. We can't." Stanton turned, his eyes locking hers with an authority sharper than any manual. "Enough. You've said your piece. This is no longer your call." Her protest died on her tongue. For the first time since boarding began, Laura's posture faltered. She looked smaller in her uniform, the certainty drained from her stance. Julian finally shifted. He leaned forward, his voice calm, even colder than the recycled air hissing through the vents. "Next time," he said, each word precise. "Check twice before you decide who belongs." The sentence hung there, heavy, reverberating through the cabin like a verdict. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Passengers in nearby seats froze, eyes darting between Laura and Julian as if they just watched a courtroom gavel strike. Even Stanton, seasoned by decades in command, felt the weight of the moment press against his chest. In 3C, Victoria's live stream faltered, her voice cracking into a whisper. He's really... She stopped mid-sentence, her screen filled with comments calling her out by hashtag, dissecting every smug remark she had made minutes earlier. The power had shifted, and she knew it. Laura took a single step back, her clipboard clutched so tightly the plastic creaked. Her eyes darted toward the cockpit door, toward Stanton, toward Julian. No escape. The narrative had already been written, and she was trapped inside it. Julian leaned back into his seat, his gaze fixed forward. He had spoken only one sentence, but the entire cabin felt reordered. He didn't need another word. The silence was almost unbearable. The weight of dignity reclaimed was heavier than any turbulence. Julian's words echoed, unchallenged. And for the first time, Laura Smith realized she wasn't defending procedure anymore. She was standing trial in front of an audience larger than the cabin itself. The aircraft rolled slowly back toward the gate, the engine still idle, the mood inside first class taut as wire. No one spoke above a murmur. Even the clink of a glass on its tray felt too loud. The air was thick with the weight of what had just happened. Julian Cole sat unmoving, eyes on his phone. He didn't scroll, didn't search. He opened the camera instead. One clean shot, a stock chart. The airline's ticker plunging in jagged red. No caption this time, just the image. His finger tapped post. That was enough. The silence in the cabin stretched until a passenger in 1D whispered, "He just did it again." His neighbor craned his neck to see, face blanching. Phones lit up row by row, passengers staring, as the second tweet spread faster than the first. The chart spoke for itself, billions evaporating by the minute. In the galley, Laura Smith froze when she caught the flicker of headlines on her tablet. Stock drops another 6%. She could hear whispers behind her. Corporate is furious. The words landed like blows. She clutched the edge of the counter, eyes darting to Julian, realizing the center of gravity had shifted beyond her reach. Captain Stanton stayed in the cockpit, headset pressed close as he listened to headquarters stumble for strategy. He didn't speak. Not yet. He simply glanced at his first officer and muttered, "History writes itself. Best we can do is not get in the way." Victoria, in 3C, scrolled frantically, her live stream long since cut off. The hashtag number passenger 3C trended before her eyes. Screenshots of her mocking face replayed endlessly. Her smile in frame had turned into a national punchline. She tried to type a defense, but every word was drowned by the flood of ridicule. The circle she once bragged about belonging to had already begun to disown her. Julian leaned back into his seat, the glow of the screen fading from his lap. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply let the silence do its work. The proof, now too loud to ignore. Headquarters line went dead for a moment, an eerie pause. No official statement, no press release. The corporate silence was louder than anything they might have said. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, whispering among themselves. They weren't just on a delayed flight anymore. They were inside a story unraveling in real time, one they would all be asked about later. Julian slid his phone back into his pocket, his posture steady, as though the outcome was never in doubt. Around him, power drained out of uniforms and titles, flowing instead into the quiet man who had spoken so little. His second tweet was just a screenshot of the stock chart, and the silence from headquarters was louder than any statement. Dawn leaked into the city as camera crews crowded the airline's headquarters. Microphones clustered on the podium like vultures circling a carcass. Reporters adjusted earpieces, checked feeds, rehearsed the phrasing of their first strikes. The company needed control, and they thought this press conference would give it back. Sarah Mitchell stepped forward, her blazer pressed sharp, her hair immaculate, her expression calm in the way only fear can make it. She scanned the crowd and began. "We regret the unfortunate incident on Flight 228. This was the isolated action of an individual crew member, and it does not reflect the values of our airline." The words landed flat. Cameras whirred, pens scratched. Everyone in the room had already seen the clips. Laura Smith's pointed voice, Victoria's mocking live stream, Julian Cole sitting silent while the system tried to eject him. Sarah's isolated incident speech sounded like theater, and bad theater at that. Across the country, phones buzzed with a different voice. Julian's media team released a statement precisely timed to coincide with the press conference. No fanfare, just 2 lines, polished like steel. "Our investment strategy is guided by integrity. We observe actions, not statements." The contrast hit like a split screen. On one side, corporate apologies scripted to contain fallout. On the other, Julian Cole, a man who hadn't raised his voice all night, dictating terms without breaking a sweat. News anchors latched on instantly. Side-by-side graphics filled morning broadcasts. Sarah Mitchell's face under the headline, "Crew error, not systemic." Then Julian's quote, "We observe actions, not statements." Analysts didn't need to explain which one carried weight. In first class, passengers replayed their footage. Clips of Laura's tone, Victoria's sneer, Stanton's belated apology, all stitched into montages flooding social media. Hashtag spread, number actions not statements, number passenger 3C, number flight 228. Commentators dissected the body language, the hierarchy, the silence that had hung heavier than any engine noise. Victoria woke up to her name trending for all the wrong reasons. Screenshots of her live stream were plastered everywhere, captioned with disbelief and ridicule. She tried to post a clarification, but every word was drowned out by replies calling her the symbol of arrogance. Laura sat alone in the crew lounge, her uniform folded beside her. She scrolled through headlines, calling her the face of outdated standards, her hands shaking. The corporate shield she had trusted was dissolving, leaving her exposed. Captain Stanton, meanwhile, was approached by a trade reporter outside the terminal. His words were careful, but clear. "We fly aircraft," he said. "We don't decide who belongs in the sky." The quote spread like wildfire, picked up by pilots' unions and industry blogs as a rebuke to his own employer. The press conference continued, but the narrative was gone. Reporters stopped quoting Sarah Mitchell's script by the second paragraph. They quoted Julian's 2 sentences instead, because brevity cut deeper than spin. The morning light caught the cameras just right, giving the illusion of warmth. But the faces in that room knew the truth. The story no longer belonged to the airline. It belonged to the man who hadn't even raised his voice. The press conference began at dawn, but by then, the narrative was no longer theirs to control. The boardroom at headquarters looked like a bunker under siege. Screens glowed red with collapsing stock prices. Executives whispering in frantic tones, as if lowering their voices could slow the fall. Coffee sat untouched. Sweat-lined collars that had been starched only hours before. At the center, a thick binder sat open on the table. One most of them had skimmed, but never truly read. The investment draft, $1.2 billion on the line, and within it, a page highlighted in pale yellow. Clause 7, ethical compliance. "He can't," one director stammered, voice cracking as though even the suggestion carried weight. He wouldn't, but everyone knew Julian Cole could, and more terrifyingly, he would. Julian sat in his private lounge across town, not hurried, not rattled. A team of legal advisors leaned close, showing him the latest wire reports. One headline flashed across the tablet in front of him. "Airline blames individual crew. Avoid systemic fault." His eyes moved over the words once. Expression unchanged. He closed the tablet, as though it had already confirmed what he knew. His voice was soft, almost conversational. Prepare the report. Their response demonstrates systemic failure. They've defaulted. One of his counsel nodded quickly, already drafting the language. Clause 7. Execute. The words were measured. Final. Back at headquarters, Sarah Mitchell's phone buzzed. She glanced down and felt her stomach drop. An alert from the Investors' Council. Effective immediately, Cole Capital withdraws from negotiations pursuant to Clause 7. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She turned toward the CEO, who snatched the device from her hand. His face drained of color as he read. He didn't just cancel, a board member said. Voice faint. He pulled the trigger we gave him. Silence thickened the room, broken only by the hum of the stock ticker on the wall. Each point lost was another knife, and the bleeding showed no sign of slowing. Julian, across town, poured himself a glass of water. No celebration, no toast, just stillness. He'd played the move hours ago when he pressed send. Everything since had been a cascade of inevitability. In the cabin of Flight 228, passengers scrolled their feeds, gasping as the headlines refreshed. $1.2. Billion investment withdrawn. Clause 7 activated. Systemic bias costs airline its biggest deal in history. Laura Smith, sitting in the crew lounge, read the same lines. Her hand trembled around her phone. For the first time, she understood she wasn't just a story. She was a case study. The boardroom tried to argue, to spin, to scramble. But the words "the deal is off" had already detonated, echoing across every news channel, every market feed, every social platform, and nothing could unpull the trigger. By mid-afternoon, the market screens looked like a battlefield. The airline's ticker plunged 26% in a single session, a red cliff with no bottom. Analysts spoke in clipped, urgent tones. Structural failure, leadership vacuum, cultural crisis. Every phrase became a headline within minutes. Inside corporate headquarters, silence replaced shouting. The board had called for emergency restructuring, but it was little more than a public execution disguised as reform. Training programs were ordered rebuilt from the ground up, compliance manuals rewritten, leadership reshuffled. It was a theater, but the theater demanded by blood. For Laura Smith, the curtain had already dropped. She was summoned, not for a meeting, but for a termination notice. The paper bore polite corporate language, but the subtext was carved in stone. Her career ended at the precise moment her voice was captured on livestream. She left the crew lounge without her uniform, the badge clipped from her blazer. By evening, her name was already in a PowerPoint slide at HR conferences. Case study, the cost of arrogance in first class. Victoria sat in her apartment, blinds drawn, her phone buzzing nonstop. The circle she once flaunted had locked her out, distancing themselves with cold statements. Her social accounts drowned in the hashtag number passenger3. C. A scarlet letter written in pixels. By nightfall, she deleted every profile. The void felt louder than the mockery. Captain Robert Stanton faced reporters outside a hangar, his voice even steady, carrying the weight of someone who had chosen conscience over convenience. "We fly aircraft," he said. "We don't decide who belongs in the sky." The quote spread across aviation forums, industry journals, union newsletters. It was a quiet manifesto, delivered without flourish, but remembered because of its simplicity. And Julian Cole? He sat alone, no cameras, no podium. His phone glowed briefly in his hand as he studied the stock's collapse 26%, and falling, a market punishment more ruthless than any apology could hope to offset. He tapped the screen once, then turned it black, setting it face down on the table. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He had seen this pattern before. In boardrooms where polite prejudice wore better suits. In negotiations, where integrity was treated as decoration. Different uniforms. Same disbelief. The headline screamed, the market panicked, careers ended, policies shifted. But Julian didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The world had already heard him. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. If you made it here, you already know this wasn't just about one man or one flight. It was about dignity, power, and what happens when silence speaks louder than excuses. We're grateful to have you as part of this community, because stories like these matter more when they're shared. Every listen, every comment, every conversation helps bring the truth into the open. If you haven't already, take a second to hit that subscribe button. That way you won't miss the next story. We drop stories about people who refuse to shrink, systems that crack under pressure, and the quiet voices that change everything.